Hello, everybody. Mr. Kilstein here. I'm here to model how to use evidence in supporting a historical argument. The question that I'm going to be modeling an answer for is, was the American outrage over the Boston Massacre valid? And we're going to assume, for the sake of this model, that I've looked at all the evidence and that the argument I wish to advance is that the soldiers' actions at the Boston Massacre were an appropriate response to American provocation. American outrage over the incident was therefore not valid. So, in other words, what I want to be using evidence to support here is that the British acted responsibly and they acted to American aggression at the Boston Massacre, and the Americans therefore had little to no reason to be outraged over the events. So we're assuming that I've looked at all the evidence and this is the conclusion I want to advance. And what I'm going to demonstrate is what maybe one supporting paragraph in a historical essay would look like and how to use evidence to support a historical argument. So after going through all the evidence, I find the testimony of James Bailey, and reading this testimony was part of what convinced me that the British soldiers were provoked and therefore acted appropriately. But now I need to convince a reader who doesn't know who James Bailey is and doesn't know what James Bailey said that his testimony is valid and that his testimony advances my thesis. So the first thing I need to do is what we call sourcing. I need to tell the reader who James Bailey is, and I need to give the reader reasons to believe that the evidence he provides is valid and that the evidence he provides is helpful to my argument. So I did a little research on James Bailey, and I found on the America's Revolutionary Museum, which is a famous museum in Boston and very reliable because it has a bunch of professional historians who work for them. And I find out that James Bailey was a sailor, and given that this is the 1700s, that probably means he didn't have a tremendous amount of education. But I also find something that is very interesting. I find that Bailey was known as a political moderate. He was neither very loyal to the Patriots, or the people who advocated for American independence, or towards the Loyalists, the people who advocated that America remain part of and remain loyal to Great Britain. This is really valuable because it means that, according to what we know, Bailey has no reason, or at least no political reason, to lie about his testimony. And we also find out that he was an eyewitness to the event where the British soldiers killed the Americans. So this is really helpful. So the first thing I did was source. The second thing I do is I look through Bailey's testimony, and I'm going to try to find what's useful for me. So you guys can see the testimony here. I've read through it, and so now I'm going to demonstrate what this would look like in the middle of a historical paper. Remember that the reader doesn't know who Bailey is, so the first thing I have to do is I have to source it. I have to explain who Bailey is, and I have to convince the reader that his testimony is valuable or worthwhile. So, let's tell the reader what I know about Bailey. James Bailey was a colonial sailor who is an eyewitness to the Boston Massacre. So now the reader knows that he was actually there, and he's therefore relevant. But let's keep going with this sourcing. Bailey had no known allegiance to either the Patriot or the Loyalist cause. It is therefore appropriate to speculate that his testimony was free of political bias. So now I've tried to convince the reader that this is a guy who has no other interest than telling the truth. So now let's actually get into what he says that advances my argument. According to Bailey's testimony, one of the British soldiers was quote, and I'm going to use a quote here because that's going to really help add meat to my use of evidence, was knocked down with a stick, and the blow struck his gun and his arm. Okay, so what I've done with this evidence, I'm going to go ahead and do some highlighting, actually. I'm going to first highlight my sourcing. So this is where I tell you why my evidence is valuable. Now I'm going to highlight the evidence section of my writing. I've included direct quotations from his testimony. So you're going to see that in red. The next part, and this is very, very important, maybe the most critical part, is I'm going to explain how this evidence actually connects to my argument. And I'm going to both explain what the evidence is and what the evidence shows. This demonstrates two things. First, it seems clear that American demonstrators were violently provoking the British soldiers, and that is evident by the fact that one of the British soldiers was knocked down with a stick. Second, Bailey's testimony shows that it is possible that the first shots were caused by an American attacking the British soldier, causing him to accidentally fire. And I say that because the stick hit his arm, hit his gun and his arm. So there you go. You can see in orange I've sourced James Bailey and explained why he helps advance my case. In red, I've given the direct evidence that helps advance my argument. And in green, I've given my analysis. I've connected the evidence. I've both explained the evidence and connected it to my thesis. So that's it. I hope this is helpful. It gives you 3 simple steps of how you can use evidence to back up an argument. The first being sourcing, the second being provide the evidence, the third being give your analysis, which explains the evidence and connects it to your thesis. Thank you.